athlete is defined by physical abilities like speed and strength, but also by character, discipline, and commitment to improvement. They embody dedication to both their sport and supporting others by prioritizing mental and physical well-being. If you look at the athletes that have participated in the community and school sports, both in South Whitley and at Whitko High School, this definition could apply to many, if not all of them. Welcome to tonight's program, The Glory and Grit of South Whitley Through the Decades. Tonight I will take you down memory lane, and hopefully it will spark sports memories of your carefree high school days. The 1910s America was a transformative decade marked by the Progressive Era and entry into World War I. Some of the things happening socially were the women's suffrage movement and prohibition. Another tragedy in this decade was the sinking of the Titanic in April 1912. From the earliest of times, South Whitley has loved their sports. This was evidenced by the selling of stock shares in the South Whitley Baseball and Amusement Association in the early part of the 20th century. This particular stock was purchased for $5 by O.A. Bollinger on July 16, 1910, for one share of the association to bring special events like sports, baseball games, and other fun community activities to town. It also helped to support local baseball players with financial help. In these early times, sports like baseball and basketball were the sports of choice in South Whitley and the state of Indiana. Here is a photo given to a young J.D. Reif by his uncle Galen. Galen was a South Whitley High School graduate from the class of 1913. He was also a member of the 1911 basketball team. This basketball team played all of their games in the Gripnut building in the gym of the former Springfield Academy. Members of the team were a dedicated bunch, even providing their own uniforms and basketballs. These members on the top row were Arthur Hardy, class of 1912, Reif, Bryant Edwards, class of 1912. Members on the bottom row were Lloyd Holman, class of 1913, John Graham, class of 1912, and Eugene Edwards, class of 1914. By the next year, in 1912, South Whitley High School had added a girls' basketball team in their first attempt at the game. There was such a keen interest taken that there was even talk of having another team the next year. The success of the team was largely due to the hard work of their coach, Miss Hopkins. The roster included Cleela Souter, Frida Ginger, Alice Merrier, Leona McConnell, Fern Johnson, and Lizzie Havens. Here is a photo of the 1912 baseball team also. Baseball was always the leading game in high school and in this decade, and through combined efforts that such a good team was organized, since they didn't even have a true coach. The team was led by the captainship of J. Wesley Graham and an unknown school teacher. They won every single game. The team consisted of members with the names of Eugene Edwards, Galen Ruff, Paul Cook, Lloyd Holman, J. Wesley Graham, Ellis I. Miller, Kohler Swartz, and Arthur Hardy. Here is a photo taken by Oliver Frank Kelly circa 1912 of the baseball team playing a game in the progress at the ball grounds. The grounds were located in a field at the end of West Mulberry Street and West Wayne Street, where the Whitko High School girls softball team currently plays all their games today. This photo is an assembly of local basketball men on December 11, 1914, that were known as the South Whitley Metropolitans. The photo is missing one player, however, that player being Haman B. Allman. Allman was principal of South Whitley High School at the time. Other team members were Owen Moore of Sydney, who was a teacher, Carl Graham of South Whitley, a tall specimen, and junior member of Graham and Sons, a dealer in general merchandise. John Wesley Graham, Carl's younger brother, Omer Metz, who ran a farm southeast of town. Mr. Metz was the manager of the team. Another Husky farmer was known as Holman, Lloyd Holman. He was the only one of the bunch who didn't have a wife or someone to properly subdue him. The team was rounded out by Clinton Jordan, a clerk at the Grip Nut Company plant. Mr. Jordan was an equal fan of chickens and basketball. The grand mogul of the whole team sat meekly at the feet of his students. His word was law when the game started. He was local referee Fred Fox. Here is the 1917-1918 basketball team that had a very good year, considering the difficulties they had to contend with that season. They only had one returning player from last year's team, that being Boyd Howenstein. The only one who met weight for this year's varsity team was last year's B team, Ralph Fox. The boys reorganized and managed to eke out 5 wins, beating teams like Cherubusco, Akron, Washington Center, and Sydney twice. Mr. Shin, the coach, knew very little about the team themselves, but he had several good plays and signals, so he drove the team until they worked well together. The Roaring '20s were a decade of rapid economic boom following World War I. Innovations like the assembly line by the Ford Motor Company made cars affordable, and the jazz age became incredibly popular. The jazz age was, of course, when jazz music, flapper dresses, and prohibition defiance was all the rage. The stock market crash in October 1929 unfortunately marked the beginning of the Great Depression and the end of this decade. The South Whitley Greens were a famed baseball team in the early days of South Whitley. The team was well known for playing independent teams from surrounding cities. The team was identified, all except for 2 men in the newspaper, by Walter Martin, a member of the team. They are in the first row, Penn Souder and Roy Howenstein. Second row, Charles Allen, Martin himself, Roy Wagner, and Arthur Allen. The third row had Harry Pence and Lon Moyer. And for the fourth row, the umpire, the 2 unknown players, and John Shantz. After the previous year's team less than stellar performance, the 1920 team played rivals such as Clear Creek, Chester Township, Columbia City, and even far away as Kendallville. During this time, the spectators got to witness one of the best basketball games ever played by a local team. In total, they played 24 games, the largest ever played by a local team. The team was led by Coach Cunningham and Principal Fairfield. During the season, Captain Kiefer started as guard but was changed to forward position for his ability to play the floor. He played in every game, including the Columbia City game where he suffered a broken nose. Robert Clapp played center and saved the team from many defeats by his scoring long shots. In a game against Auburn, Erie Matson was forced out by a badly sprained ankle that resulted in him being made first sub. Floyd Casteter, Thomas Rohde, Fred Fossler, and George Holloway played subs, but for some reason they were unable to hold their place on the team. This team broke the tournament record of South Whitley High School by winning their first game against Milford, 35-1. In 1924, the girls basketball team witnessed the most successful season in the history of the school. The team played 13 games, the most of any team in the county. Coach Miss Perkins and Captain Mary Walter were both proud of how the team showed a fine spirit of sportsmanship and a fighting spirit on the court. The school was especially proud of the fact that they beat Columbia City in the county tournament on Columbia City's home floor with a score of 12-7. Tennis was also becoming an increasingly popular sport in 1924, and the students hoped by 1925 that they would be able to hold several inter-school meets. A school tournament was held in the fall of 1924 to determine who would represent the school in a meet against Larwell. Harold Bentz won the right to represent South Whitley. He defeated his opponent from Larwell quite handily. Later that year, though, Bentz lost his title to Foy Eisenman. Eisenman was not eligible for the athletics during the first tournament. On the girls' side, as you can see, they never published the winner between Dorothy Heinlein and Florence Harley. By the start of the 1930s, the Great Depression was devastating to banks and individuals across the country. FDR was elected the 32nd President of the United States in November 1932. The 21st Amendment was passed in 1933, ending national prohibition. This decade ended in 1939 with the release of cultural classics Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. It also launched another new decade of sports at South Whitley High School. Yale leaders like Alice Snyder and Robert Blaine could be seen cheering on the teams of South Whitley Bulldogs. On October 7, 1930, Coach Sycophus issued a call-out for basketball candidates. Prospects for a terrific season were bright as 6 lettermen remained from last year's team. The force was also strengthened by the arrival of the Polk brothers, Clarence and Walter, from Washington Center. Just one short month later, Coach Sycophus gave up teaching and accepted a position in the post office. According to IHSAA rules, a new coach had to be chosen. Mr. Eugene Beard received the position as official coach, and the boys succeeded in winning 11 out of 18 games that year. Alongside the boys, the 1930s girls basketball team consisted of 9 players. Mildred Joliffe was the captain as she had the position of jumping center. She was joined by teammates Stella Casas, Bonnie Walter, Neva Lee, Mary Gardner, Bethel Gardner, Catherine Bayman, Bernice Richard, and Dorothy Myers. The girls played 10 games. They lost 4, won 5, and tied 1 game. The most exciting game was the one against Washington Center. It was played on Washington Center's floor, and the Bulldogs were behind by 2 points. As the final whistle was about to blow, South Whitley made the points and resulted in a tied game. The high school also hosted an interclass basketball tournament that year, and it proved to be a success. A keen sense of interest prevailed among the class at all of the games. The juniors were crowned champions, but only after a battle with the seniors. The next 2 photos were donated to the library by Art Bechtold. The team not only included Art, as you can see, but other well-known names as in town like Stump, Sheeler, Myers, Harley, Bechtold, Butler, Duggins, Plattner, and Steller. Unfortunately for the 1933-34 girls team, not all the players were identified. Those that were included Evelyn Bollinger, Lucille Alton, Geneva Bayman, Jane Bentz, Iona Myers, and Ruth Swank. When the early 1940s rolled around, the world was defined by World War II. The war was already raging in Europe after the Germans invaded Poland, leading Britain and France to declare war. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the war became a global conflict. Since the Americans were now in the war, our local boys decided to step up and declare themselves soldiers. Sports and school were put on the back burner as one by one they were either drafted or enlisted to go and defend our country. While the fathers and older brothers were gone, the younger boys and girls who could play sports had more important things to do, trying to help their families keep the home fires burning. The 1950s ushered in a major baby boom after the end of World War II. Society emphasized traditional family structures like intense pressure for women to focus on domestic life. This decade also brought the Cold War's Red Scare and the Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas ruling in 1954. It made school segregation unconstitutional. In 1957, the launch of Sputnik sparked the space race between Russia and the United States. It was also the time of the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. The youth embraced a new music culture with artists like Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry, and the rise of television with I Love Lucy. When World War II ended, organized interscholastic sports for high school girls in Indiana virtually disappeared. With this change, South Whitley now had 3 levels of boys basketball: varsity, second team, and junior high in 1955, and no girls' teams anymore. With no female sports allowed anymore, the girls of high school became cheerleaders, as that was their only way to promote sports at South Whitley High School. Baseball and track became the teams to be on after the basketball season ended. Players like Ted Easterday, Dave Cordell, Clark Graff, Dan Harshman, and Jim Dimmick participated in multiple sports. The team also added a men's golf team and a men's volleyball team. The golf team featured Captain Terry Clapp, while the volleyball team players were Steve Hartzler, Jack Eisenman, Theron Rumsey, and Gordon Logan on the first row, and the bottom row was Dick Wright, Mickey Evans, Quentin Tackett, and Jerry Dimmick. 1956 was a really good year for athletics at South Whitley High School. The athletic year began with the baseball season that included defensive work by all players, good team spirit, and a desire to win. The team won the county trophy for a third year in a row by defeating Larwell 8-3. The battle for the batting trophy was a very close affair, with Clark Graff, Ted Easterday, and Ted Lynn emerging as the top three batters, with Clark Graff winning the title. The basketball season was just as successful as the baseball one. The record of 17 wins and 5 losses was the best record in school history. The team entered the sectional as a favorite to win it all. They went on to defeat Rowan, Noble Township, and LaGrow before losing to Wabash by a mere 1 point. The future was bright, though, because they had only 3 seniors on the team. Mickey Evans won the free throw trophy, and Ted Easterday won a trophy for most assists and his excellent passing record. The track team was a considerably smaller team than in years past. It was a team that was built around a core group of veterans. Outstanding times and distances were turned in by Clark Graff, 10.2 seconds, a county record in the 100-yard dash. Ted Lynn in the broad jump at 21 feet 1 inch, a school record, and by Ted Easterday in the pole vault with a vault of 11 feet 1 inch, also a school record. The men's volleyball team also won the county trophy that year, like the baseball team. It was the first championship for the young team. Some familiar names competed in this sport, names like Easterday, Tackett, Cordell, Duggins, and Graff. The players were not the only ones that shared in the glory and grit of 1956. The team managers, coaching staff, the athletic director, Charlie Beck, and even Pug the Bulldog mascot put in a lot of work to make these teams succeed. Let's go back to March 27, 1952, when an article ran in the South Whitley Tribune about a call-out meeting that was to be held to any person interested in sponsoring a summer Little League team in South Whitley. The article stated that there would be 2 county leagues, the National League and the American League, and South Whitley would take part. Any boys 9 to 12 were eligible for participation. A rule book was received by the county association because all rules were used not only here, but nationwide. The entire league was ran exactly like Major League Baseball. County officials were elected, and they were included Roy Kilby, president, Charlie Beck, vice president, Robert Hollingsworth, secretary, and Bus Harold, treasurer. The first tryouts were held in May 1952 here in town. Skip ahead to 1960, and South Whitley now had two leagues, Little League and Pony League. Little League was still for 9 to 12-year-olds, and Pony League was for 13 to 15-year-olds. The leagues continued to grow in popularity in the 1970s as more teams were created and more boys enjoyed summer participation in these games. In April 1978, a girls' Little League softball program was started and over 30 girls signed up. The Blue Jays were first tourney champs that year, led by the head coach Brenda Smith and assistant coaches Judy Ebbinghaus and Darlene Rudd. The South Whitley Summer Leagues continue to be a rite of passage each summer in town. They even added a T-ball and coaches pitch league for our littlest citizens. The 2026 Summer Baseball League has recently gotten underway for the season. The start of the 1960s ushered in a time of change in America. It was a tumultuous and transformative decade marked by an intense social and political and cultural shifts transitioning from post-World War II optimism to deep division in America. The assassinations of JFK, his brother Robert, and Martin Luther King Jr. had the country in a state of chaos. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis had America on the brink of a nuclear war, and at the end of the decade in 1969 saw Apollo 11 land on the moon and a 3-day music festival called Woodstock that was a time of peace, drugs, and music. Even when the rest of the country was at the start of the civil rights era, sports was still a key part in the life of South Whitley. Here is a throwback photo from November 6, 1971 of the South Whitley Bulldogs varsity basketball team that ran in the 1996 Columbia City Post and Mail. This photo represents the 1963 basketball teams that featured twins Steven Stansik-Foos, Dave Weitzel, Denny Weitzel, Randy Striegel, Roger Parrott, and John King among the varsity squad. As you can see, they were coached by Paul Schoaf and Max Myers. Although the IHSAA officially sanctioned wrestling as a high school sport after World War II in 1950, South Whitley didn't offer it until 1965. When it began, South Whitley had a highly successful first year with an 11-2 record. Here is a team photo that included names like Max Blaine, Harry Kyler, Steve Kreider, Jim Rosen, and Dwayne Kyler, among others. They represented the school and the town very well. The South Whitley baseball team in 1967 ended the season with a record of 5 wins and only 2 losses. The team was led by Kent Roberts, who was the on-base leader with a .650 average. Stan France, who was leader of the team in pitching with an earned run average of 1.75, and finally Terry Zorger, who was the leading batter with an average of .440. Terry was a very talented athlete in his time at South Whitley High School. He not only lettered at baseball, but in basketball and track as well. Baseball was definitely where he shined, though. After he graduated in 1969, he went on to play at Huntington College. He also played semi-pro ball in Fort Wayne as a third baseman. He was scouted by Boyd Bartley for the Spokane Indians, where he would start his professional career. In 1962, he was drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers in the 11th round of that year's draft. Spokane was one of the minor league teams for the Dodgers. Then in 1973, he was playing for the Bellingham Dodgers in the Northwest League in Bellingham, Washington. 1973 is the last year that I could find any information about Terry in the baseball world. He currently lives in Urbana, Indiana. In 1969, the Bulldogs had an outstanding record through the basketball season. They finished the regular season winning all their games except for 4 against teams like Manchester, Cherubusco, Heritage, Prairie Heights, and West Noble. Unfortunately for the team, they lost in a first-round rematch at the sectional against North Manchester with a score of 54-66. With South Whitley's loss, the sectional title was up for grabs. North Manchester would play in the next round game and were favored to win against a second-place team in Larwell. Coach Roger Tuggle remembered the game in a 1999 newspaper article. Larwell's sectional win started with a relatively easy win over Cherubusco. They were saved from a third rematch with South Whitley and played North Manchester. Larwell would use the free throw line to upset the Squires 65-53 in a morning game. This set up a real David and Goliath championship game. against county rival Columbia City. The game was a back and forth battle through the first half, with Larwell trailing 28-31. Steve Everly returned the lead to Larwell at the start of the fourth quarter, and the team led most of the final quarter. A free throw by Everly gave the Trojans a lead of 75-69. Columbia City made a comeback, though, and pulled within 2 points with 4 seconds left. Larwell kept the ball until time ran out. This sectional title became especially sweet when it was announced later in that year that Larwell High School would close forever. The late 1960s also set the scene for a major coaching change that would transform the face of basketball in South Whitley and Whitko for years to come. In the fall of 1968, new head basketball coach Bill Patrick was hired to lead the teams of the future. Under his supervision, the Bulldogs were able to capture victories from their two biggest rivals. That was an accomplishment considering the majority of the team were juniors. Coach Patrick started his varsity career at Sydney, his alma mater, for 1 year before coming to South Whitley High School. He then made a smooth transition as the coach at the new Whitko High School just 4 years later. He was a mainstay at Whitko for 26 years, earning the respect of coaches from around the state. In the mid-1990s, controversial circumstances would lead to Bill resigning his post. Bill's full coaching career was highlighted by several awards, including the 2025 John Wooden Legacy Award. He was inducted into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame in 2008 and the Kosciuszko County Basketball Hall of Fame in 2016. When his career ended at Whitko in 1995, he had amassed a total record of 463 wins and 171 losses between Sydney, South Whitley, and Whitko. This record included 8 TRC championships, 11 sectional titles, 2 regional titles, 1 semi-state championship, and one trip to the state finals in March 1991. He had 1 undefeated regular season in the 1979-1980 basketball school year. The 1970s were an interesting decade to say the least. In 1972, the game of Pong was released by Atari to start a new type of entertainment. By 1973, America was in the middle of the energy crisis with the oil embargo caused by the Arab-Israeli war. After the release of tapes during the Watergate scandal, President Richard Nixon resigned his position, allowing Gerald Ford to become the 38th president in 1974. The last part of the decade included events like the release of the Star Wars movie in 1977 and the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident on March 28, 1979. When the early 1970s rolled around in South Whitley, the school system was in a transition of change. The construction of a new high school that would consolidate Pierceton, Sydney, Larwell, and South Whitley into a new school named Whitko would change the local sports scene forever. The final season of the South Whitley Bulldogs sports seasons started in the fall of 1970. Here is a roster of the varsity basketball team that included stars like Steve Parrott, Tom Davis, Randy King, Rex Shipper, and Matt Winger, just to name a few. The team had a successful year with a record of 14-6 before ultimately losing to Columbia City in the sectionals. The cross-country team had an up-and-down season with some stellar wins and hard losses. Here, along with the team photo, is a photo of Jim Woods, a junior, running in the sectional meet where he broke the school record for the second time during the season. His best time was 9 minutes 48 seconds against Pierceton. Not only did the cross-country team represent South Whitley well, but so did the young track team. The only 2 seniors and 2 juniors, the Bulldogs were able to compete pretty well with most schools. The team had excellent underclassmen, including Tim Sutton, Rex Shipper, and Phil Lowe, who all qualified for the sectional championship competition. The last golf team of South Whitley High School showed their grit every meet with an eventual record of 5 wins and 6 losses. The team's #1 player was Brad Bishop with an average of 43.1 at the end of the season. The final sport of the South Whitley Bulldog legacy in the spring of 1971 was the baseball team. With 5 freshmen in the starting lineup, the young team played some exciting ball. The team improved a great deal and having victory in their grasp before losing a heartbreak 4-3 decision to Warsaw in the sectional. Matt Winger and Mike Lancaster showed a lot of promise as freshman pitchers. Mike Eckert, among another freshman, hit around 400 for the season. 1971 was also the year the teams from Caston, Culver, Triton, and North Miami would form a new sports conference called the Three Rivers Conference. In 1974, other teams joined the original 5 schools. These were the Manchester Squires, Southwood Knights, and our own Whitko Wildcats. 2 years later, Tippecanoe Valley Vikings decided they too wanted to be part of the TRC. Some teams later withdrew in the 1970s, the 1980s, and as recently as 2022 when Tippecanoe Valley withdrew and North Miami in 2023. The current 10 teams are Lewis Cass, Maconaquah, Manchester, Northfield, Northwestern, Peru, Rochester, Southwood, Wabash, and Whitko. On June 23, 1972, as part of the Education Amendments of 1972, President Richard Nixon signed the Title IX legislation into law. This legislation prohibits sex-based discrimination in federally funded sports and education programs. This led to separate teams for girls being permitted for competitive contact sports with equitable resources. Female athletics went from 7% to 41% increased participation in high school sports. Not only was 1973 the first official full year of Whitko High School sports, but it was also the first year that football was recognized as a sport in Indiana. Whitko's record that year was a perfect 7-0, beating teams like Northwood, Wawasee, Lakeland, and Bishop Dwenger. This was also the first year the Whitko High School co-ed volleyball team. Under the guidance of Mr. Pickerel, the team competed with other schools. Members of the team were Linda Rupley, Mike Sands, Steve Simonson, Tom Warner, Kevin Vergen, and Keith Peoples. This photo is a group of girls in 1973, the Girls Athletic Association, who initiated a varied and progressive program as a member in their second year of existence. Other activities that they were involved in were an interscholastic volleyball, basketball, and tennis teams. In 1973-1974 school year, it is considered the first year of girls athletics. Here is a photo of the first varsity and B teams in basketball and varsity volleyball. These teams were the start of an enduring legacy of greatness with the women athletics and sports like basketball, volleyball, softball, track at Whitko High School. The 1980s were a time of cultural change in the United States, with the rise of MTV, personal computing, and the yuppie culture. It was the end of the Cold War, the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, and the time of intense consumerism dominated by Reaganomics. It also is considered to be the first me generation. Even with all those things happening in America, at the Whitko School Corporation, participation in athletics did not decline. The 1979-80 boys basketball team is still the only team to remain undefeated throughout the regular season in school history. They claimed the TRC championship before being beaten in the first round of the sectional in a rematch against North Manchester. Manchester was looking for revenge after Whitko beat them in regular season 68-67. Not only did the men's team in 1980 have a terrific season, but so did the women's team. The team consisted of players like Laura King, Lynn Baker Myers, Sandy Bruck, Marquet Long, and Terry Gable. They were coached by John Moore and Carol Kurtz. The managers were our own fellow librarian Lisa Glick Gothrop and Saber Bishop Maurer. The 1980 golf team was a great group of students. The team consisted of 1 female and 13 male competitors. Seniors featured were Tony Caudill, Anne Hathaway, and Brad Van Kirk. It also featured twins Brett and Bart Bailey. In 1981, a fresh-faced freshman by the name of Jeff Peters entered high school and would soon put his mark on Whitko basketball program. Jeff played starter on the freshman team, but also played on and off for the junior varsity. By the time he was a junior, he had made the varsity squad. This is where he shined. He would win a slew of awards. He even broke 5 school records like career points 1150, single points in a game 51, and most free throws in a game 15. He became the first player at Whitko to be named to the Indiana All-Star team, the Channel 21 Player of the Week, and All-State Associated Press. After high school, Jeff went on to attend Notre Dame to play with legendary coach Digger Phelps. The success of basketball in town was eclipsed by football in the fall of 1986. The team started its Cinderella season on August 29th with a win against rival Columbia City at home, 19-6. This win would spark the team, and they would rattle off 8 more wins before knocking off Taylor High School 47-0 on Halloween night in the first game of the sectional. This would be a night of celebration after the game, with players riding on a high of a win streak. Unfortunately, the season would take a tragic turn on November 1st, 1986, when 2 of the team's players would be involved in a head-on collision. The accident involved a total of 4 cars. Junior Ryan L. Huff was killed instantly, and Junior Barry Ousley was severely injured. Huff was a punter and backup fullback. He was also student council president. After the accident, the entire team started wearing number 32 on their helmets in honor of Ryan. They also made a vow that they would play the next 4 weeks and win the whole state championship for him. It became a rallying point for the team. After defeating Tippecanoe Valley High School, Shenandoah, and Fort Wayne Lures, the team made it to the state championship game where they would face Tell City at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis. The first half of that game was a nightmare for Tell City. Whatever play they threw out, Whitko had an answer for. The Wildcats would recover a fumble, and junior Joey Booz would run in for a touchdown. Whitko's lead became 26-0 with 3 minutes and 10 seconds remaining. The Cats' reserve team would enter the game as time ran out. The Whitko Wildcats were 2A state champs. They were undefeated with a score of 14-0 record and kept their promise to Bryan. This was the first state championship ever in Whitley County in a high school team sport. The 1987-88 school year brought about the 2 new sports to Whitko for girls to choose from. In the first season, the ladies golf team boasted 4 seniors: Jackie King, Leslie Tenney, Anita Howard, and Kim Hart. The regular season matches consisted of a 9-hole round with a low score getting medalist honors. Sectional consisted of a full 18 rounds of golf. Although they ended with a 2-6 record, the underclassmen were looking forward to year 2. On November 11th, 3 golfers were honored at the Fall Sports Banquet. Anita Howard was MVP, Ann Earnhardt was the lowest putt award, and Dawn Gridrich was the mental attitude award winner. For the first time ever, Whitko was able to boast a girls' softball team also. They put forth a tremendous effort that year to overcome the difficulties associated with a first-year team. When Coach Tom Dilling was asked about the team, he responded, "The girls have a tremendous talent and are working very hard. They play well as a team." The season opened against Rochester and ended against Wawasee. The record this year was 5 wins and 11 losses. Junior Missy Krieger summed up the season by saying, "We may not have the best record, but we are just beginners. The main thing is we had a lot of fun." In the winter of 1989, wrestling took a front row seat in our school history. The season turned out to be full of surprises, even to the players themselves. They not only had an amazing record of 21-5, but they sent 7 wrestlers to regionals, 6 to semi-state, and 2 to the state wrestling championships. Senior Matt Coots won the state title in the 111-pound weight class for the first time any wrestler had ever won state. Junior Mike Venable would also place 3rd that year. Matt's win at the state would make a nice end for the Wildcats in the 1980s. As the 1990s rolled around, America was involved in the first Gulf War. It was known as the post-Cold War peace decade. It was also a decade that brought the World Wide Web, both the millennials, 1981 to 1986, and Generation Z, 1997 to 2012. The Human Genome Project and the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19, 1995. Alternative music like grunge, reggaeton, Eurodance, and hip-hop became popular along with satellite and cable TV. The 1989-90 boys basketball team had high hopes going into the season. They would be led by senior Scott Adams, Mike Howard, Chad Patrick, Todd Dartley, Doug Reif, and Randy Walters. They started off their season with a win against Garrett, and the winning continued before they ended the regular season with a 17-2 record. They would go on to sectional play, a heavy favorite to win it all. They made it to the championship game against a dominant squad in North Manchester and defeated them to advance to regional play. In the first game of the regionals, the Wildcats would square off against the DeKalb Barons and handily beat them. In the night game, they would play a talented Northside team. The game was nip and tuck before Whitko scored the go-ahead bucket. The Cats were victorious, and the team would cut down the nets in celebration. This would be the school's first trip to a semi-state at the Allen County War Memorial Coliseum. Unfortunately, they would have to play the Concord Minutemen in the morning game and were beaten by a score of 60-78. This would end the season just shy of the state finals. When basketball practice rolled around in the fall of 1990, that year's team was excited to repeat the previous year's success. With the returning group of now seniors Chad Ousley, Jason Ousley, co-captains Steve Nicodemus and Rod Thomas, Casey Hartley, and Rich Tenney leading the way, the season got underway with the annual night before Thanksgiving game against Columbia City. The outcome, however, did not favor the Wildcats. The Eagles outscored Whitko 79-74. This would be the start of a very up and down regular season. That was until Coach Bill Patrick was gifted a bright red and blue striped tie by his sister. Every time he wore it after that, the team would come out with a win. The players would go on a 6-game win streak, including the sectional play after receiving the tie. Coach Patrick and any other coach will tell you that a few breaks are needed to go along with talent. The Wildcats' first break came in the sectional draw when they ended up getting the bye. They would play Blackhawk Christian and would easily win that game and move on to play against North Manchester. The Squires were ahead by 5 points with 1 minute 40 seconds left, but Chad Darley's layup and some misses by Manchester led the Cats to rally and head to the regionals the following weekend. In regional action, the team would win the morning matchup against Fort Wayne Southside to move on to play the New Haven Bulldogs Saturday night. The last play of the game didn't go as Bill Patrick planned, but the end result was a heart-stopping 73-72 win when Rodney Thomas passed the ball to Chad Ousley instead of to intended target Steve Nicodemus, who was being heavily guarded. Ousley made the layup and the title and lifted the Wildcats to a second straight regional title. It was almost St. Patrick's Day in March 1991 when Whitko traveled up to Notre Dame's Joyce Center to compete in the semi-state against LaPorte early that morning. In the second and third quarters, the Wildcats outscored their opponent 46-28 to take a 60-45 lead. Although LaPorte tried to rally, they would never take the lead away. We were headed into the semi-state championship game against the Marion Giants. This would be another David and Goliath battle. The Wildcats would get off to a slow start, and by halftime they were trailing by 16 points. This break would give Coach Patrick an opportunity for a good chewing out of his team. The speech worked because they were able to trim the lead to 9 points at the start of the fourth quarter. A rash of Marion fouls allowed the Cats to trim the lead at the foul line. This would be all Whitko needed to tie the game at 52. A series of baskets by Steve, Chad Darley, and Chad Ousley gave the team their first lead at 58-55. With an Ousley three-pointer, we were ahead by 5 with 37 seconds left. Steve sealed the win with 11 seconds left. The team had won its first ever semi-state title and a trip to the Final Four in Indianapolis. 35 years ago, the Wildcats would head to the Hoosier Dome to play the #1 team in the state, Gary Roosevelt. The whole town showed up to support their team in the morning game. It would be an uphill battle because Gary Roosevelt had the top Purdue recruit in Glenn Robinson. Unfortunately, the Panthers held the team to just 36% shooting for the contest. The Wildcats fell in a heartbreak 53-83, the largest margin in Final Four history since 1960. Whitko would finish the season with a 17-9 record and 1 game shy of the state championship. Even though the results were not what Whitko wanted, the pregame hype is something I will always remember fondly since I was a senior that year. The news media attention from all across the state was extremely cool. They were comparing the team to the 1954 Milan team, which the movie Hoosiers was based on. The other 2 teams to compete that year were Indianapolis Rebuff and Terre Haute South. Gary Roosevelt won the state championship with Robinson being named Mr. Basketball. Although they had lost the game, one player would end his season on a high note. Steve Nicodemus, a 6'4" senior, was awarded the state's highest award for mental attitude, the Arthur L. Trester Award. This award was named for the IHSAA's first commissioner. The award was handed out starting in 1945. It was an award given to a senior participant in the state finals that not only demonstrates mental attitude, but scholarship, leadership, and athletic ability. In the spring of 1994, ladies tennis had a standout star in senior Ann Klein. Ann was the #1 singles player, but getting to the regionals was no easy task. She had lost her first set 7-5 and was down in the second set 5-1 when she started to cry because she didn't want her season to end. On the ropes and 1 game away from elimination, she rallied. She won the second set 7-5 and posted a 6-1 victory in the decisive third set. This would send her to the regionals, the first Whitko player to do so since 1987. A year later, in the 1995, the girls' track team would win the first track sectional title in the history of Whitko at Tippecanoe Valley High School. They were deemed an ordinary group of girls who did extraordinary things. To round out the 90s, in the fall of 1998, Whitko High School football coach Brian Sprunger was awarded a trophy for his 100th win for the school. As the turn of the century on January 1st, 2000, Y2K was a real concern to start off this decade. The United States was reeling from the 9/11 attacks, the ensuing war on terror, and the Hurricane Katrina in 2005. 2008 brought the election of Barack Obama, the country's first black president, and the Great Recession. Youthful trends included the emergence of the emo culture, and MySpace had an impact on teen music and social media. The 2001 girls softball team, led by Captain Melissa Melissa Kripe and Terry Hamill was the only young team willing to work hard and stick together as a whole. During the team's 7-game win streak, they were able to pull out 2 high-scoring over-the-fence home runs by Laura Kern and Stacy Saha. On Monday, May 28, 2001, Whitko softball defeated Bluffton and New Haven to win the Norwell sectional. This day was marked as the greatest day in school This day marked the greatest day in softball history since the inception in 1988. Whether you believe that cheerleading is a real sport or not, it became the next team to reach the regionals in 2002. The cheer team accomplished many things, including being regional champs at Bishop Dwenger High School. They then placed 4th at the state competition at Anderson Highland High School. Senior captains Joel Schrader and Natalie Graves were great leaders for the team. In 2004, after a year's battle with the Whitko School Board, soccer was accepted as a club sport at the high school level, with boys and girls combining to play and have a lot of fun and win games. Another new sport that was sanctioned by the Whitko School Board and the state of Indiana was bowling. The bowling team had a great season, finishing with a record of 6-5. Both the boys and girls teams did their best and used their incredible talent. Head coaches were Lee Newswanger and Max Julian. Skip ahead to the fall of 2007. The Lady Wildcats cross-country team would advance to the semi-state for the first time, playing 5th overall at the regionals. As the 2010s rolled around, the decade would be known for intense political polarization and significant cultural shifts. The legalization of same-sex marriage and the election of Donald Trump fueled a tumultuous, digitally connected culture. Key themes included the recovery from the Great Recession, the presence of smartphones and social media evolving into a primary news source. While these things were going on nationwide, sports was still front and center with the high school students in our area. At the beginning of the decade, wrestling would take forefront again as Whitko would advance 4 wrestlers to the state tournament. These wrestlers were Chaz Booz, Daniel Rothgeb, Jordan Gilbert, and Dylan Letourneau. This was the first time the Wildcats had sent so many individuals to the state wrestling finals. In 2011, 4 Whitko senior soccer stars, Michaela Sylvester, Jordan Sims, Cassie Jones, and Lindsay Hicks, were named to the All-Star North-South soccer game. This allowed them to showcase their talent. This was also the year that soccer went from being a club sport to a fully sanctioned IHSAA sport. Archery was the newest sport to arrive in 2012 at the high school. Although it was only a club sport, it was fast becoming a popular sport among students. 2 years later, in the summer of 2014, Whitko archer Nikki Lawson would attend the NASP World Archery Tournament in Madison, Wisconsin. NASP is the National Archery in Schools program. Nikki ranked 106th out of 512 middle school girls, as you can see from the newspaper caption. 9 seniors led the 2017 baseball team to a record 19 wins and a sectional title over Tippecanoe Valley right before Whitko's graduation night. By winning the sectional championship, the regional play was scheduled for the day after graduation. Many of the senior boys ended up either postponing their grad parties or they had to leave in the middle of the game to play the most important game of their lives. Regrettably, they lost the regional game. The season and their Whitko career were now officially over. The baseball team was not the only spring team to be successful in 2017. With 3 seniors, Riley Inslee, Kennedy Kroll, and Andrea Snavely heading up the squad, they not only won the regional title, but punched their ticket to the semi-state softball championships. They would win the first game of the semi-state, but lose in the championship game to Elwood, 0-13 in Class 2A. Clearly, Whitko had established itself as a premier softball program throughout the state. In 2018, after only losing the 3 seniors, they had again reigned at the top of the at the Three Rivers Conference and in the top 10 rankings for 2A schools. Following the success of the 2017 school season, the group of girls would not disappoint. By the end of the regular season, the team would finish 6-3 in the TRC and 21-8 overall. They would defend the Oak Hill sectional title, defeating Wabash and Oak Hill to advance to the regionals. Whitko would host the regional game, and in front of a huge home crowd, they successfully defended their regional crown 3-2 over Western Boone. In semi-state action, the Lady Cats would face Tipton, where they lost a heartbreaker 1-0. The 2019 boys tennis team was a group of boys who were learning to compete. The team saw a dramatic increase in participants in the fall season. With greater numbers came a more competitive practice in which more players challenged one another. The team fared well in the TRC and fought hard in the first round sectional loss. With a large number of players returning for the 2020 season, the future was definitely a bright one. The start of the current decade was, of course, marked by the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020. The decade we are living in is often characterized as a period of historic shift with significant activism in social, environmental, and government issues. The era has seen significant inflation, labor shortages, and high consumer prices, with concerns about wealth inequality reaching levels last seen in the 1890s. We are again in the midst of the me generation due to increased self-focus, entitlement, and social media usage. Once the pandemic was officially ended by the government, schools would get back into session, and so would the athletic teams. In the summer and fall of 2021, the girls' soccer team was preparing for a great season. Sadly, after just one game, the season was canceled and pulled as a sport at Whitko High School. Also in 2021, the Whitko sister duo of Augusta and Guinevere Garr were taking the softball scene by storm. Both girls succeeded so well that the older sister Gus was named to the 1A, 2A All-State first team, and the younger sister Gwenny made the second team. In June of 2022, the girls softball team again took center stage by winning sectionals against a tough Lewis Cass team in the Class 2A softball. They would go on to play Western Boone exactly like they did in the 2018 team. It would take an extra innings to beat them 9-7 for the first regional since 2018. Whitko went on to lose in the semi-state. This would be where the girls' season would end for seniors like Gwenny Garr, Kaylee Adkins, Gabrielle Wilson, Cassidy Skinner, and Madeline Dafford. The start of the next school year in 2022-2023 would bring a dedicated group of seniors to Whitko's varsity volleyball team, such as Morgan Howard, Abby Frank, Brooklyn Coburn, Brooklyn Schrader, and Allison Tucker, Carly Ayers, and Kennedy Sloan. That season was especially rewarding because the 2021-2022 year had a terrible losing season. The turnaround was one for the record books, with the team finishing with a 25-5 record. All the hard work paid off. Football also took a front seat in the fall of 2022 with a new head coach in Brad Sprunger, who brought his dad, former head coach Brian Sprunger, out of retirement to assist him. Coaching was in the Sprunger family genes because younger brother Jeff was the head coach at Southern Wells. A new state-of-the-art scoreboard at the football field was also added in May of 2023. The football team would find their grit and dig deep. After a few winless seasons, they would get their first win in 2023 against Prairie Heights. In March 2024, the Whitko ladies team would travel to compete for the Hoosier State Indoor Track Relays at the Indiana State Fairgrounds in Indianapolis. 4 lady Wildcats would excel. The 4x400 meter relay of Emerson Harper, Willow Osborne, Kira Sordelay, and Gwen Howard would place 5th. Other individual wins were Emerson Harper second in the long jump and Gwen Howard second in the shot put. Overall, the team would place 7th in the state. Just 3 months later, Howard would be awarded first place in the IHSAA Girls High School Track and Field State Finals in shot put and 3rd in discus competition. She is now currently playing for Duke. In November 2024, the Lady Wildcats, led by head coach Justin Jordan, would embark on a journey to be the best ladies basketball team ever at Whitko High School. This team would also be led by just 3 seniors, Bracia Harrison, Adriana Phillips, and Madison Cripe. They would play their first game against Central Noble, and they would put up a 63-54 win. They would end the regular season with a 17-4 record. Entering into tournament play, they would handily defeat Woodland, South Adams, and Bluffton to win the sectional crown. This would mean that they would get to travel to Rochester and play Bremen in regional action. Trailing 19-24 at intermission, they would come out of the third quarter scoring 19 straight points to pull within one, 38-39. They then pounded on the Lions on a 15-5 fourth quarter run to win the school's first ever ladies basketball 2A regional title. On February 2nd, 2025, they played Eastside in the first semi-state game. The game ended in a 45-58 loss for the young team. After the exciting basketball season that last year, spring sports would take center stage at the school. The ladies tennis team was excited for the season to begin. The team included number 1 singles Bailey Wolf, number 2 senior singles Alexa Culp, and number 1 doubles Grace Burnworth and Andrea Wursler. Also, the number 2 doubles team of Jillian Culp and Amy Brown to round out the team. Some of the highlights of the season included a 5-0 sweep at Peru on senior night, winning first place at the Wabash tournament and second place at the West Noble tourney. That brings us to the current high school year, 2025-2026. Although the spring sports season is underway, the winter season brought some glorious highlights. The girls basketball team had an identical tournament season as last year, winning both the sectional and regional titles before losing to Oak Hill in the morning game at the semi-state. The future is bright for next year because the basketball team only lost 1 senior, Reese Stonebreaker, who will graduate with the class of 2026. It also saw senior wrestler Landon Smith capture his 100th career win at the Matt Kuntz Invitational at Whitko Junior Senior High School. He would even make it to the regional wrestling championships. In the 2013 yearbook, I found a photo of the definition of what it means to be a cat. I think this sums up the 115 years of sports at South Whitley and Whitko High School. Thank you for coming. Have a great evening.